With me now is Atlantic staff writer Barton Gellman. His new piece is titled "The Election That Could Break America." So this is not the first time, Bart, that the president has refused to commit to a peaceful transfer of power. He did it in 2016, talking about whether he'd accept the results of the election. Obviously, he wasn't the president back then. And he's also done it in the lead up to this election before this. You did an extensive report, exhaustive report about what that could mean. Talk about the effort to undercut mail-in voting and what the president could be trying to do.
Well, the president has made it clear by word and deed and just by psychological disposition that he will in no event concede defeat in the election. That's a big problem because concession is how we end elections. There is no umpire who's got jurisdiction over the whole thing and can say to the loser, you lost, the game's over, the whistle's blown. The mail-in vote part of it is quite interesting because Trump has spent months now discrediting the legitimacy of mail-in votes, making up nonsense, frankly, about fraud or about election rigging or about forgeries. They're all just completely invented from whole cloth. Mail-in ballots, absentee ballots have been used for decades with no discernible fraud. But the way he's done the campaign has skewed the electorate, has split the electorate into Republicans who are now believing him and are disinclined to vote by mail, and Democrats who want to protect their health in an age of COVID and are inclined to use vote by mail. And this creates a proxy in which the president's thousands of lawyers on election day and afterward can look at votes that come in by mail and by the numbers be confident is more likely to be a Democratic vote than a Republican vote, and therefore try to get those disqualified. And there will be endless litigation, potentially on the scale of the Florida recount litigation in 2000, except in multiple battleground states.
You heard Lindsey Graham say that a moment ago, that expect there will be litigation. You also write about the period between Election Day and Inauguration Day, those 79 days that you call the interregnum. You write, according to sources in the Republican Party at the state and national levels, the Trump campaign is discussing contingency plans to bypass election results and appoint loyal electors in battleground states where Republicans hold the legislative majority, with a justification based on claims of rampant fraud. Trump would ask state legislators to set aside the popular vote and exercise their power to choose a slate of electors directly. The longer Trump succeeds in keeping the vote count in doubt, the more pressure legislators will feel to act before the safe harbor deadline expires. That deadline is December 8th. Explain that.
Yeah, this is something I didn't understand at all until I started reporting this story. We're accustomed to the idea that we vote, and based on the popular vote in each state, the electors are apportioned. So you win the state's electoral vote if you win the state's majority in public vote. That's not in the Constitution. The Constitution says that the electors are chosen by each state legislature as it sees fit. And so all of them, since the middle of the 19th century, have said we'll do this by popular vote. But the Supreme Court ruled in 2000 that the state legislatures can take back this power from the voters at any time. And so Trump's people are talking about a maneuver in which they would go to the Republican state legislature in a swing state like Pennsylvania or Michigan or Florida and say, we think the official vote count is cooked, it's crooked, it's rigged, throw in all of your made up charges. And you should therefore, as a legislature, appoint Trump electors to represent what you believe is the faithful depiction of the will of the people of the state. So disregard the popular vote because the count is now hopelessly embroiled in fraud. And instead, you choose the electors. This has happened once before in American history. In 1876, 4 states sent in dueling slates of electors. One, for example, that was certified by the governor and one by the legislators or something like that. And it was not until 2 days before the inauguration that Samuel Tilden conceded the election to Rutherford Hayes. And this is not a good precedent for us, because one of the reasons he conceded defeat was that the Republican incumbent president, Ulysses Grant, was prepared to declare martial law to prevent Tilden from claiming inauguration. If we come down to that, if we come down to the final moment in which two people are preparing to be inaugurated because we still haven't sorted out the election, then the commander-in-chief is going to be one of those candidates, and the candidate who had caused the chaos in the first place.
So after that safe harbor day where the delegates are chosen, and we can put the timeline of events up on the screen, this is where you say things can really go off the rails in an unpredictable way. You game out scenarios that take it all the way up to Inauguration Day, where Donald Trump, Joe Biden, and Nancy Pelosi could all make a claim to hold the office of the presidency. When you game out these scenarios, is this in your mind the worst case scenario, or are these becoming likelier by the day?
Well, the problem is the distance between worst case and plausibly likely is very uncomfortably thin right now. I believe that there is no circumstance under which Donald Trump will concede defeat. Besides litigation, which does eventually end, and besides just talking about it in public and on social media and marshaling forces in the streets, the most effective thing he could do to throw sand in the gears is to cause dueling slates of electors to be appointed, to cause his Republican allies in some states. I talked to them once in Pennsylvania, to say we're sending Trump electors regardless what the vote says. Once that happens, then the Constitution and the Electoral Count Act put the decision point in Congress. It's up to Congress to decide which electors get to count, if any, because they can also decide that none of the electors from a disputed state are going to count. The law is full of logic bombs and sort of labyrinthine dead ends, and it is easily possible that Congress deadlocks in that circumstance.
And you say there's no umpire here, which is a surprising to consider because we've never been in this situation before. I encourage everybody to go out and read Bart's story, and also the big news from it that the Trump campaign is discussing contingency plans to bypass election results and appoint loyal electors in battleground states. That is huge news. Barton Gellman, an incredibly reported piece. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me, or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.